Let me ask you something before we start. Have you ever felt like you were somehow different from the people around you? Not better, not worse, just different? Like you noticed things other people seem to miss? Or you felt things more deeply, processed them differently, or held yourself to a standard you couldn't quite explain? If you have ever described yourself as too sensitive, too in your head, or just too much, I want you to stay right here. Because this video is for you. What I am about to share with you are 5 signs that you are more emotionally mature than most people you know. And the reason you have not recognized them yet is simple. Emotional maturity does not feel like strength. Most of the time, it feels like struggle. Let me explain what I mean. Before we go into the 5 signs, let me clear up the biggest misconception about emotional maturity. Because I think it is the reason so many emotionally mature people do not recognize themselves. Most people assume emotional maturity means not getting emotional, being calm all the time, never being bothered by things, never needing reassurance, having perfect control. That is not what it is. Emotional maturity is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to feel your emotions fully and still choose how to respond to them. It is the willingness to sit with discomfort without running from it. It is the capacity to hold complexity, to understand that 2 things can both be true at the same time, that people can hurt you and still be good, that you can be right and still be wrong about something. Emotional maturity is not a destination. It is a way of moving through the world. And here is the thing. The people who are most emotionally mature are very rarely the ones bragging about it. They are usually the ones quietly wondering if they are doing life right. They are the ones losing sleep over something they said 3 days ago. They are the ones who feel enormous guilt over small mistakes and enormous compassion for people who have hurt them. Sound familiar? Then let's talk about the 5 signs. Sign number 1. You feel genuine guilt, not just embarrassment. There is a crucial difference between guilt and embarrassment that most people never learn, and understanding it tells you a great deal about where someone is emotionally. Embarrassment is about how you look. It is the burning feeling when someone witnesses you doing something wrong. It is rooted in the fear of judgment. The moment the audience disappears, the moment no one is watching, embarrassment fades. Because it was never really about the action. It was about the audience. Guilt is completely different. Guilt is about what you did. It is the quiet, persistent feeling that you acted in a way that was not consistent with your values. It follows you when no one is watching. It wakes you up at 3 a.m. It makes you want to apologize even when the other person has already forgiven you or forgotten entirely. Guilt is an inward moral compass, and it is one of the most reliable indicators of emotional maturity. Now, here's what emotionally immature people often do with discomfort after wrongdoing. They convert guilt into embarrassment, or better still, they skip guilt entirely and go straight to defensiveness. They rewrite the story so that they were not actually wrong. They minimize what happened. They blame the other person. They avoid the person they hurt rather than addressing it. You probably know people like this. People who are constitutionally incapable of a clean, genuine apology. Who, the moment they sense accountability approaching, become angry or distant, or suddenly very focused on what you did wrong. Emotionally mature people do the opposite. They sit with the discomfort of having caused harm. They resist the urge to minimize or defend. And then, crucially, they act on it. They apologize. They change. They do not repeat the pattern. But here is the shadow side of this sign that I really want you to understand, because it might be the most important thing I say in this entire video. Emotionally mature people often overfeel guilt. They feel guilt for things that are not their fault. They absorb responsibility for other people's emotions. They apologize when they have done nothing wrong. They replay conversations obsessively looking for the moment they could have been kinder, clearer, more careful. This hyper-responsibility is not a character flaw. It is a sign of a deep moral seriousness, but it can become exhausting. It can make you very easy for the wrong people to take advantage of. It can make you a magnet for people who will weaponize your conscience against you. The goal of emotional maturity is not to feel more guilt. It is to feel the right amount of guilt for the right things, and then do something productive with it. If you recognize yourself in this sign, if you are someone who feels deeply responsible for your impact on others, who loses sleep over the way a conversation went, who apologizes sincerely rather than strategically, that is sign number 1 that you are more emotionally mature than you realize. Sign number 2, you can hold 2 conflicting emotions at the same time. Psychologists call this dialectical thinking, the ability to hold 2 seemingly contradictory truths simultaneously without needing to resolve them into one simple narrative. Let me give you some real examples of what this sounds like in practice. You love someone and they hurt you deeply, and you do not need to choose between continuing to love them and acknowledging the pain they caused. Both are true. You are proud of how far you have come, and you are genuinely disappointed by where you still fall short. Both are true. You feel relief that a relationship ended and real grief for the version of the future you thought you were going to have. Both are true. You are angry at someone for how they treated you, and you understand, from knowing their history, why they became the person they are. Both are true. Emotionally immature people are deeply uncomfortable with this kind of complexity. They need the story to be simple. He was a bad person, full stop. That time in my life was a waste, end of story. I should not be sad, I made the right choice. Simplifying the story feels safer. It is less painful. It requires less of you. But emotionally mature people are willing to live in the complicated middle. And I want to tell you what that looks and feels like from the inside, because it does not feel like wisdom. It usually feels like confusion. It feels like not knowing how to answer when someone asks, "Are you okay?" Because you are okay and you are not okay, and both of those things are equally accurate. It feels like being unable to simply write someone off after they have hurt you because you understand them too well. People around you think you are naive or in denial, but you are not. You are just unwilling to reduce a human being to their worst moment. It feels like being unable to be fully happy about a success because you are simultaneously aware of who helped you get there, what it cost, and who it did not work out for. This capacity, the willingness to sit in complexity rather than flee into simplicity, is one of the defining characteristics of emotional maturity. And it is also one of the loneliest. Because most of the world prefers simple stories. Here is the psychological backdrop. In early development, children see the world in what therapists call black and white thinking, sometimes called splitting. People are good or bad. Things are safe or dangerous. This is appropriate for a developing brain trying to navigate a complex world with limited cognitive resources. As we grow, most people develop the capacity for nuance. But stress, trauma, and emotional immaturity often cause people to regress back to splitting. You see it everywhere. In politics, in relationships, in how people talk about their exes, in how people describe their childhoods as entirely wonderful or entirely terrible. When you are capable of complexity, when you can hold that your parent both loved you and failed you, that your past was both painful and formative, that the person who hurt you was both responsible for their choices and shaped by circumstances beyond their control, you are operating at a level of emotional sophistication that is genuinely rare. It will not always feel like a gift, but it is one. Sign number 3. You take accountability without destroying yourself. This is one of the most subtle and least discussed dimensions of emotional maturity, and one of the hardest to achieve because it requires balancing 2 things that seem like opposites. On one side, genuine, unflinching accountability. The willingness to look clearly at what you did, own it fully, not minimize it, not shift blame. To say, "I was wrong. I caused harm. I am responsible for this." On the other side, self-compassion. The ability to hold that accountability without allowing it to collapse into shame, self-punishment, or a complete dismantling of your sense of self. To say, "I did something wrong," that does not mean I am irredeemably bad. Emotionally immature people struggle with accountability for one of 2 reasons. Either they cannot take it at all, deflecting, minimizing, blaming, disappearing, because the threat to their self-image is too great. Or they take it too dramatically, collapsing into self-flagellation, becoming overwhelmed with shame, turning every mistake into evidence of their fundamental worthlessness. Neither of those responses is accountability. The first is avoidance. The second is, in its own way, still a form of self-focus. It is just self-focus in a negative direction. When someone spends more time performing their remorse than actually changing, that is not growth. That is just guilt tourism. True accountability, the emotionally mature version, is actually quite quiet. It does not require an audience. It does not perform. It looks, it acknowledges, and then it turns its energy toward repair and change. You see it in the person who, after a difficult conversation, reflects on their own role without being prompted. Not, you made me feel, but I noticed that I responded badly to that. I understand why. I need to work on that. You see it in the person who does not need to be caught in order to change. Who updates their behavior based on internal reflection rather than external consequence. You see it in the person who can receive feedback, even unfair feedback, and find the kernel of truth in it without either dismissing it entirely or accepting it wholesale. Here is the shadow side of this sign too. Emotionally mature people sometimes confuse accountability with punishment. They believe they need to feel bad for a certain minimum period of time before they are allowed to move forward. They have difficulty accepting forgiveness from others and from themselves. If you are someone who takes responsibility seriously, who holds yourself to a high standard, who would rather sit with the uncomfortable truth of your own mistakes than retreat into denial. And if you sometimes wonder whether the world would be easier for everyone if you were just a bit more selfish, that is sign number 3. Sign number 4. You set boundaries and you feel guilty about them. I want to spend time on this one because I think it is the sign that most surprises people. We talk about boundaries a great deal these days. And the way boundaries are usually discussed makes it sound like emotionally healthy people set them cleanly and confidently, without hesitation, and feel nothing but peace and empowerment afterward. That is not how it works for emotionally mature people. Not at all. Emotionally mature people feel the guilt of disappointing someone. They feel the weight of saying no to someone who needs help. They feel the grief of withdrawing from a relationship that is causing them harm, even when they know it is the right thing to do. They hold the tension of caring about someone's feelings, while also knowing that honoring those feelings at the expense of their own well-being is not sustainable. Setting a boundary for an emotionally mature person is not a power move. It is a painful act of self-preservation that is carried out with full awareness of its cost. Compare this to emotionally immature people who either have no boundaries at all, who give everything until they are empty and then explode in resentment, or who have what I would call walls instead of boundaries. Rigid, defensive, preemptive shutdowns that are not protecting a relationship. They are ending one. A boundary, when set with emotional maturity, sounds like this: I care about you, and I am not able to continue this conversation tonight. I need some time. I will come back to it. A wall sounds like, fine, whatever. I'm done. One of those is protecting something. The other is destroying it. The guilt you feel when you set a boundary is not a sign that the boundary is wrong. It is a sign that you care about the other person. The question is not whether the guilt is there. The question is whether you allow the guilt to override the boundary, whether you collapse the moment someone pushes back, or you sit with the discomfort and hold the line anyway. Here is something that I think is important to say clearly. Emotionally immature people will often interpret your boundary as an act of aggression. They will call it selfish. They will say you have changed, that you used to be more caring, that you are being difficult. Some will guilt trip. Some will simply withdraw their approval. An emotionally mature person who sets a boundary hears all of that, feels all of that, and still holds the boundary. Not because they feel nothing, because they understand that their own depletion helps no one, because they know that a relationship which requires you to have no needs in order to survive is not actually a relationship. It is a dynamic. If you have been working on saying no, even when it feels wrong to you, if you have ever held a boundary and spent the rest of the day wondering if you were the bad guy, if you have ever had to choose between your own well-being and someone else's comfort, and it cost you something, that is sign number 4. Sign number 5. You are, or you are learning to be, comfortable with being misunderstood. This one is the deepest of the 5, and I think it is the one that takes the longest to develop. For most of us, being misunderstood is profoundly uncomfortable. It activates something primal. We want to explain ourselves. We want to correct the record. We want to be seen accurately. This is deeply human. The desire to be known, really known, is one of the most fundamental human needs. Emotionally immature people respond to being misunderstood in one of two ways. They over-explain, sometimes obsessively, trying to get the other person to understand until the conversation collapses under the weight of justification. Or they go to the opposite extreme. They perform not caring. They say, "I do not care what people think," in a way that makes it very clear they care enormously. True emotional maturity at this level is the capacity to hold the experience of being misunderstood without collapsing and without hardening. Not collapsing means you do not spiral into self-doubt every time someone misreads your intentions. You do not abandon your own sense of self simply because someone else has narrated it inaccurately. You do not require constant external validation to feel confident in who you are. Not hardening means you do not build walls to avoid the pain of connection. You do not stop caring about what people think entirely, because that is not wisdom, that is detachment. You remain open, curious, and genuinely interested in feedback that might teach you something about yourself. The space between not collapsing and not hardening, that middle ground, is where emotional maturity lives. Practically, what this looks like is something like this. Someone misunderstands your actions, they tell other people, the story gets distorted. And instead of immediately rushing to defend yourself, you pause. You ask yourself, is there any truth in this that I need to look at? And if the answer is no, if you genuinely know your intentions were sound, you let it be. Not perfectly, not without discomfort, but you let it be. You have learned, slowly and painfully over years, that you cannot control the narrative other people create about you. You can only control who you actually are. And you have decided that who you actually are is worth more than the version of yourself other people are willing to believe in. This does not mean you stop caring about relationships. Emotionally mature people care deeply about connection, but they have made a shift. They have moved from needing to be understood to wanting to understand. They are more interested in seeing clearly than in being seen favorably. And there is something profoundly freeing about that, even if it takes a long time to get there. Let me bring all 5 of these together, because I think there is a pattern here that is worth naming. Sign 1. You feel genuine guilt, not just embarrassment. Sign 2. You can hold 2 conflicting emotions at once. Sign 3. You take accountability without destroying yourself. Sign 4. You set boundaries and feel guilty about them. Sign 5. You are learning to be comfortable being misunderstood. Look at all 5 of those. What do they have in common? They all involve discomfort. Every single one of them requires you to stay in a place that feels difficult and not run. Emotional maturity is not about feeling better. It is about becoming better at feeling. It is about developing the capacity to be present with what is real, even when what is real is hard. If you recognize yourself in even 2 or 3 of these signs, I want you to hear this directly. The reason you have not called this emotional maturity is because emotional maturity does not announce itself. It does not come with a certificate or a moment of arrival. It arrives slowly, quietly, and usually dressed up as suffering. It looks like the years you spent trying to understand someone who hurt you. Like the times you held yourself accountable when no one would have known if you had not. Like the relationships you ended at great personal cost because you knew they were not right. Like the apology you gave that you were not sure was deserved. That was all growth. Even when it hurt, especially when it hurt, you are further along than you think. And the path forward, while it will still have hard moments, is one you are already equipped to walk. Thank you for spending this time with me. If something in this video landed for you, share it with one person who needs to hear it. And if you want to go deeper into the psychology behind emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and living more intentionally, hit subscribe. I put out a new video every week. I will see you in the next one.